These damn Americans, Frank Capra said of his adopted countrymen. These damn Americans, they're so free, individuals, on their own, not taking their hats off to anyone.
I called Mama. She was so happy she cried. She wants you to have her wedding gown. It's white lace.
Yeah, that's good. I can't get married in your mother's dress. She and I, we are not built the same way.
We can have it altered.
Yeah, I know you don't. That's good. I'm good to level with you. We can't get married at all.
Why not?
Well, in the first place, I'm not a natural blonde.
Doesn't matter.
I smoke. I smoke all the time.
I don't care.
Well, I have a terrible past. For 3 years now, I've been living with a saxophone player.
I forgive you.
I can never have children.
We can adopt some.
But you don't understand, Osgood. I'm a man.
Well, nobody's perfect.
Lucky you!
Best 36 holes in golf.
You tuned in to Alternate Shots Podcast,
Arnie's Army.
where we talk about golf,
Marquis, Sandys,
poker,
Bond, James Bond.
horse racing,
I'm all in.
great movies.
Alfred Hitchcock.
We have no script.
And down the stretch they come.
We're glad you joined us.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Whoop. Let's start again. Billy, as we said in our prior episode of the greatest Hollywood filmmakers, we're going to cover a couple more. How about that intro? The depth and breadth of Billy Wilder and the what do you call it? The sentiment and the emotions that Frank Capra played on. These are got to be two of your favorite all-time filmmakers.
It's starting to remind me of our quest to cover all 36 holes at Wingfoot. You know, you try and start with 3 or 4 or 5 of the best directors, and before you know it, there's going to be 30 or 40 of them as well. So this could go on for a decade.
If you ask our viewers, they may know more films that are done by Billy Wilder and Frank Capra. Now, Billy Wilder, maybe we should start with Billy today, and then gravitate to Frank Capra. I know we don't like to have a script, but you're right. But let me ask you the question I asked you earlier with Alfred Hitchcock, which is impossible to answer, but maybe not impossible. If you look at Billy Wilder, his 60 years in filmmaking from 1929, 1989, he's 7 Academy Awards, and he had 21 actors and actresses that were nominated for Academy Awards. It's incredible. What's your favorite film from Billy Wilder?
Witness for the Prosecution is definitely my favorite. Double Indemnity is another one of my favorites. But to show you his wide range, Sabrina, which is a completely different style and genre, is also excellent with Audrey Hepburn. Some Like It Hot is some people think is the best comedy of all time. So this guy had range. This guy could hit every shot, basically.
What I saw him interviewed by somebody. It wasn't Cavett, it was somebody else. And they have a picture of him in Vienna, and he was a young boy, and they dressed him up as a girl because the interviewer said his parents wanted a girl. So Billy Wilder was preparing
For Some Like It Hot.
For Some Like It Hot. How about that?
Well, we all get our behavior from somewhere. So, Wilder did the variation on his films. I mean, he did a lot with Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine. He did The Apartment. He did Marilyn Monroe with The 7-Year Itch and Some Like It Hot. This guy really covered a lot of ground. And for movie buffs, don't mistake him with William Wyler, who was a completely different director. He was the guy who did The Best Years of Our Lives and some other movies like that. And he was also extremely successful, great director. But the two of them should have such similar names is odd. But Billy Wilder, the volume of what he did, the span of time and the range of his movies is, it's probably the only guy like that.
And the odds that he got to do that were just nearly insurmountable. he left Germany and Europe just as Hitler took over.
Well, hindsight is 2020, as they say. And if this happened, that would have happened. But for him, he basically was now separated from his family and had to start a whole new life. Like nothing, it's hard to get beneath the skin of these guys, and I've almost intentionally avoided that in my life because I just want to enjoy their works of art without necessarily analyzing their what they're thinking or where they came from and stuff like that. But there's so much interesting background with him, but that he could come out of all of that and produce not only the number of films, but it's not like he had a one-track mind. I mean, the difference between Double Indemnity, which is a very dark film noir, and Sabrina or Some Like It Hot, that's worlds apart. That's that's like it's hard to compare. It's apples and oranges. That the same guy could do both of those things. It would be like like picturing Alfred Hitchcock doing some kind of slapstick movie. That's how wide that range is.
Well, I think Hitchcock had range, but I think Wilder had a bigger range. I think, and I had to do some research here. I was thinking, and it's often many people think that Witness for the Prosecution is a Hitchcock film because
Witness for the Prosecution. Yeah,
it's a Hitchcock type suspense film.
Yeah, that's in the top 10 of my top in my 100 top 10s. That's in there.
What was your favorite scene in or favorite scenes in Witness for Prosecution? Because it's an older film, but it's not an old film we've learned. If you haven't seen this one, this should be the next film you dial up when you've got an hour and a half to watch a movie.
Absolutely, absolutely, and watch Marlene Dietrich. She's as always the consummate professional, as always very alluring and just an interesting actress. Marlene Dietrich probably doesn't get the acclaim she deserves for her career, but she was awesome on all different levels. And she worked for Hitchcock as well as Billy Wilder and Orson Welles. She kind of touched all the bases, and she was never gave you the impression that she was worried about being upstaged. She played her parts, and she basically stole the show when she did. And I don't think it was intentional. I mean, she was so good that Mel Brooks, spoofed her in Blazing Saddles. Madeline Kahn imitated her.
Basically spoofed the scene that's in Witness for the Prosecution when she's in the basement in that little speakeasy. She did that during the war years. Forget about movies and making a living as an actress. She entertained people in these little crummy 6-foot-tall roofs where I'd hit my head, and you're claustrophobic, and the smoke and the
Marlene Dietrich played an older woman in Touch of Evil with Orson Welles. And she was a minor part, but still, again, it's the scenes you remember with Marlene Dietrich. She's a very, very memorable character. And a director like Billy Wilder had an eye for that kind of thing. Look at the actresses he used. Marilyn Monroe, Audrey Hepburn, Marlene Dietrich. They're countless. Barbara Stanwyck. He also did.
I like that Double Indemnity. Barbara Stanwyck and
Fred McMurray.
Fred McMurray was a nice guy in the movie, but he wasn't in that one.
Yeah, no, and he didn't like that, being the bad guy. I think Double Indemnity might be the movie that he decided, no more. I'm not being a bad guy anymore. I'm going to be, the father of my 3 sons and son of Flubber, and go into Disney movies and stuff. But Fred McMurray was another great and interesting character from Hollywood. It's a different age today, and maybe it's passed me by because I've gotten older, but I hope in the long run that some of the younger generation catch on to some of this stuff before it's too late.
Well, I did hear Cavett introduce Billy Wilder. He got invited to one of the big movie
premieres.
What was his name? Swifty Lazar, Irving Lazar. I'm not sure quite the guy's name, but he used to have the big parties during the Oscars and big parties out there in Hollywood. And to get invited was something else. So Cavett said, "Are there any rules? Are there any things that I ought to know about when I go to this party? I'm new at this." And so someone said to him, "Yes, do anything you can to sit next to Billy Wilder.
There you go.
He said he was so funny. He told me the story. Cavett said, he said he was in France. He said the money was so flimsy it would fall apart in your hands. The money in France,
Right.
and yet you couldn't rip the toilet paper with your hands. But he had a million of those stories. He's a very quick-witted guy. You know, he grew up in Austria, Hungary, Vienna, Poland, and as quickly assimilated to America. And everybody wanted to be with him. Think about this cast of Sabrina. You had my favorite, Humphrey Bogart. You had William Holden. You had what was it? John Williams was the father of Audrey
Yeah.
Hepburn, and he was a
He was
great.
one of Hitchcock's guys too, John Williams.
John Williams was the inspector for the insurance company in To Catch a Thief, and he played that role great. He was
Right.
just
He was also the inspector in Dial M for Murder.
yeah. He was in a lot of movies, but in this one he played a different type of character. I'm not sure the exact town in Long Island, but it's in the Gold Coast of Long Island, 80, 100 years ago. Yet the technologies they had, these people had an indoor swimming pool, an indoor tennis court, outdoor tennis courts, outdoor swimming pools, gardens that took 25 people every day, their hardest work to keep up.
Like a 10 car garage.
Hey, well, more than that. That's bigger. And then there was a house above the garage, which where she lived.
Yeah,
And,
they lived up there.
and oh my goodness.
But that was, you know, Audrey Hepburn's done a lot of great stuff. And Audrey Hepburn, I think, you know, is one of Hollywood's greatest successes on all levels.
Everyone said you went to a John Ford movie, you knew it was a John Ford movie because of the way it was big. You said you talked about the largesse. It was a countrywide thing.
Yeah, vast scenery.
Vast and so forth. And Billy Wilder was a director, but he started out as a writer. I don't remember if John Ford or Hitchcock did any writing, but Billy Wilder's tombstone says, and he started out as a writer and a producer, but he's a director. And he didn't take it the same way that Hitchcock did or Wells. That was their focus. They were the director and they were sitting on the camera, you know, while it moved around. But let's see what he has to say about being a director.
Billy, how would you determine structure?
Well, structure to me is compare it with building a house. You have to have a base where the house is going to stand. You have to have walls. You have to have pillars that are going to hold it up. The staircase, the second story, or whatever. It is a kind of a mixture. Writing a movie is a mixture of architecture and, forgive me the pompous word, poetry or storytelling on a certain level. It's not that I make myself a drawing and a blueprint, and it's just kind of an instinctive thing.
So he said something that I find very telling in that interview when he said he didn't want to use the pompous word poetry. You know, he's basically saying, and his movies show that he was sort of a man of the people. He was a regular guy. He wasn't putting himself over everybody. He wasn't looking at his works of art as if they were works of art. He was probably able to identify with the characters and on a level that, you know, made them so personable. And all those movies, it's The Apartment, all these movies. Think of how many times he used Jack Lemmon, and think of Jack Lemmon and his sense of humor. You can sort of see it right there in Billy Wilder, you know, why he would be taken with a guy like Jack Lemmon or vice versa.
He had to leave room for these great actors and actresses to improvise a little bit or portray their role a little bit. He talks earlier in this interview about if he were writing for another director like John Ford, he would write it all out. But for him, you know, just give me the scene, you know, we're going to the library and there's 7 pages of dialogue and he can handle that.
Right.
Other people, as you know, screenwriting is tedious work. You have to say every little thing that's going to happen on that film.
Right. That's why some of the, you know, especially the newer guys, Guy Ritchie's and stuff like that, who write their own scripts and direct their own movies, they don't have to be as precise on paper because they have the whole picture in their head and and they go with that. But you could tell Billy Wilder, you know, you have epic movies. I mean, William Wyler, who I mentioned before, did Ben-Hur, and he also did, Best Years of Our Lives. That's a wide span in itself. But Billy Wilder's movies were all about the characters. Even the darker ones like Double Indemnity is all about the characters. He had a take on people, or he let the actors and actresses become those people, and he was very good at it. He was very good at it. I hesitate to say man of the people, but he seemed to be more on a level of, regular human behavior in his movies.
You believed his characters. You believed Audrey Hepburn was this confused little girl that was lovesick for
William Holden.
And how that evolved, or you believed Fred McMurray, who went totally against his type, and yet Billy Wilder got him into that bad guy role. And then in that same film, who would have guessed it? Edward G. Robinson was the good guy.
And one of the best performances, he was with the little man inside of him that was bugging him and going on and on. He was basically the guy who did the investigations on insurance claims to make sure they were legit.
Chubb Insurance must send their investigators into a training room, and they must use that as one of their films as far as being a good investigator, because he did all the things, and he must have learned from somebody that did that. He's such
and again,
a actor.
The professionalism of Edward G. Robinson, I can't praise him enough. I think he's probably the most underrated actor of all time, because I think he's one of the best actors of all time. He could play gangsters, comedy. He played Dr. Ehrlich, and he played Reuter in biographical pics. The guy was just an amazing actor, and again, shows no ego by playing that backseat role in Double Indemnity, where, you take a movie like These Vines Have Tender Grapes with Edward G. Robinson and Margaret, what was her name? Margaret O'Brien as a child, the second Shirley Temple. It's completely different roles, completely different. He could do anything and carry it across, and he did not have the looks of Cary Grant or Gary Cooper. So to get a guy that looked like that to be a leading role in something that wasn't a gangster movie, the versatility there is unbelievable. And that Billy Wilder would use him in a movie like Double Indemnity, where he's really the third, maybe the fourth most important person, is my hat's off to Billy Wilder, and always off to Edward G.
Well, what about Some Like It Hot? That's in my top 10 movies of all time.
Yeah, everybody loves Some Like It Hot. I mean, they've redone it on Broadway and messed it all up, because that's what they do today in this world. They think they're correcting someone's mistakes, but Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon and Marilyn Monroe and Joey Brown, George Raft, incredible movie, actually.
What was incredible about it is it was so real life. You felt like you were in the Prohibition days. You felt like you were in that, St. Valentine's Massacre scene, Chicago, and it was all black and white, no color. And they have Tony Curtis dressed like a woman, but he couldn't stop being Tony Curtis. It was great. He couldn't help himself. There's Marilyn Monroe's right here. The hell with everything else. So, that was part of what made it so funny. You should watch the movie if you ever want to know if you're a Florida person and you see Florida today. It's nothing like it was, but 100 years ago, Florida looked like that when they went down to Florida. By goodness, did he capture how beautiful that was over there? And just the tools.
It was like wilderness.
It was wilderness, but then you had the boat was so complicated. Tony Curtis couldn't figure out, not even not the cabin cruiser, that was complicated. He couldn't figure out where the music was. My steward is off tonight. My stereo steward, or my music steward. He couldn't figure out how to get the little launch boat to go straight.
And how about the train? That's a lost part of America, traveling by train like that with all the berths. You were basically sleeping in a dormitory on a train. any number of things could happen. Any number of people could be, right next door to you. And there's been many, train births that Three Stooges have used, W.C. Fields. It's a common gimmick in some of those old movies because it was a common way of traveling.
But he leveraged it. He had a great scene in the bathroom where she's chopping the ice on the cymbal, and then they're practicing. The Sue's girl band is practicing in the car. How did this all happen in this little tiny space? And then even tinier, there's 20 girls up in the upper berth.
Yeah.
Eating cheese and salami.
There's an old Preston Sturges movie called The Palm Beach Story that was directed by Preston Sturges, another one of Hollywood's greats. Has a great scene on a train where Claudette Colbert is taking the train trying to get down to Florida, and she ends up meeting Rudy Valley. But William Demarest and a whole bunch of other drunk fox hunters are on the train with their guns, and it's crazy. It's amazing, And then you think of Strangers on a Train, and that's a completely different way of using the train. So
yeah,
and there's some Sherlock Holmes movies on trains. Yeah, the train was a great vehicle. No pun intended for some Hollywood movies.
And Hitchcock on that train set you up for later on, just starting at the ground level and looking at the guy's feet.
Yeah.
Bruno's feet and the tennis player's feet. Well, any last thoughts on Billy Wilder? Because he is so prolific. There's 25 great films. Any one of them you go to, money back guarantee. But once you get one or two, you should watch them all.
I would suggest Witness for the Prosecution, Double Indemnity, and Sabrina. If you like headier stuff, maybe, Stalag 17 or Sunset Boulevard, they're not quite as uplifting as Sabrina or as mysterious, as mystery-minded as Witness for the Prosecution, but they're all excellent. But start with Witness for the Prosecution. Never mind Billy Wilder. The movie on its own is right up there as one. It will entertain you.
Well, you don't often roll off your tongue the fortune cookie or the buddy buddy. Those are the Matthau Lemon.
Yeah, Walter Matthau. Yeah, The Odd Couple.
I'll watch anything that has either Walter Matthau or Jack Lemmon in it, and especially quickly if they're both in it, like The Odd Couple. But he really knew how to use those guys and the comedic genius and the timing fabulously. They weren't his best films.
Yeah, and they showed us Walter Matthau, who was another, interesting Hollywood actor.
Give me your sense on Walter Matthau.
Well, to me, as we've mentioned before in other episodes, how vast the character actors were back in the day, the Thelma Ritters and all the different character actors, Eve Arden. Walter Matthau sort of was one of those in the next generation. He graduated to being a little bit more than a character actor, but he was basically a character actor. He was fun scenery. But there's an early movie called Mirage where he plays a private eye, helping Gregory Peck, who has amnesia, figure out what happened and who killed who and how did it all happen. And it attempts to be a Hitchcock-like movie. It doesn't quite reach there, but it's a fairly interesting movie, and he's very good in it. And he plays a different role than he ended up playing. It's not comedy. But him interacting with Jack Lemmon is, it's like Errol Flynn and Alan Hale or something like that. They go together. And I guess Billy Wilder figured it out because he paired them together a bunch of times, and they must have been friends in real life. I know Walter Matthau and Jack Klugman, ironically, were friends.
Right.
Jack Klugman went on to play Walter Matthau in the TV Odd Couple, with Felix,
probably
Tony Randall.
Time at Aqueduct together, huh?
I could tell you a story. I don't know if it's urban legend or not, but Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon were at Santa Anita, and there was an old guy there who was a racehorse tout. They called them the guys who went around. They had different ways of getting people to give them money. And this guy was there all the time, and he approached Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau and told him he loved a long shot in the first race at Santa Anita, and it was a real long shot. So he wheeled him in the double. That means he played him to win the first race with every horse in the second race. So if he wins the first race, he wins the double. And sure enough, the horse comes around and he's winning, and he's a real long shot. And the guy's all excited. His horse wins, and the guy drops dead from a heart attack at the track. And Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau are crowding over him. And someone says, you know, is he alive? And Jack Klugman says, only in the double. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's the story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, let's just wrap this one up by, you brought up the horse racing. We're getting close to some interesting horse racing. We're going to do a horse racing episode soon. We got to start thinking about the Masters as well. So we're going to do a Masters episode. Maybe we'll do it ourselves. Maybe Billy Harmon will join us. We're going to do something for the Masters, because I think this golf season is incredible with what's going on. Just anybody can win the Masters, even.
And that's what's happening. They're figuring that out. The entire tour is figuring out. They're looking at these guys who are winning. If he can do it, I can do it. It's getting contagious.
We could talk about golf forever. We're going to wrap this up. This is the Billy Wilder episode. We're going to do the next episode you're going to see will be about Frank Capra, another great filmmaker, but he had a different approach. He came with some different background, but he was an immigrant, and he had those lessons to take forward. Billy, this has been fabulous.
Yep, thanks, Bobby.
Why are you laughing?
Well, at least we have a laugh to add at the end. That's what happened. Somebody changed my grip, and the next thing you know, I can't do the podcast anymore. I felt like I was in the first row of the first pew at church, right during the sermon.
And your brother was poking
My brother was making me laugh.